My panel is here. Nice to see you all. So you have her clearly leaning into using the verdict as a political weapon, and then you have Donald Trump leaning into the verdicts and using them as a political weapon, obviously in a very different way, sort of for retribution. Brian Lanza, I'm going to start with you since you're the only one at this table who has worked for Donald Trump. I know it's probably hard to stop him from doing that, but should he?
Yeah, listen, I think the president's going to do what he wants to do at the end of the day. And I think the thing is the focus for him and the rest of the campaign is going to be focused on the economy and focused on the issues that matter. You know, when I see an ad like, when I see her Kamala talking about it, I almost want her talking more because the public has such an adverse reaction to the things she says. Now, talking about cheating, the only one feeling cheated here is probably the American public. They were promised something 3.5 years ago, a strong economy, a safe world. We have 2 wars overseas. We have a 3rd one about to start between the Philippines and China, which the U.S. has, military agreements with. And we have inflation wiping out the middle class, wiping out savings, wiping out people's credits. I think the public feel cheated. So you have to be careful with the word she uses.
Congressman Khanna?
Well, the president has had a very strong record of bringing manufacturing back, of record job creation, lowest unemployment. But here is the contrast. The president is out there on D-Day trying to bring this country together, speaking about our aspiration, invoking President Reagan, saying we have a unifying message. And Donald Trump is on Dr. Phil talking about retribution. I think that's going to be the real case of what type of country are we? Are we a country that's going to come together with the president's message, or are we going to want to tear each other apart?
Doesn't sound very unifying to me. I mean, Kamala Harris on the attack this week, and candidly, Joe Biden attacking, I think, Donald Trump during his overseas speech. Normally, we're worried about people attacking presidents when they're overseas. We don't normally have to worry about presidents attacking their opponents when they're overseas. I think it underscores the horrible week the Biden people had. The Wall Street Journal says he's slipping behind the scenes in a deeply sourced story. Politico says blows up the popular narrative that Joe Biden has nothing to do with his family's business dealings. The New York Times today is out with a piece debunking all the personal narrative myths of Joe Biden. There's chaos all around the Biden campaign right now. And to top it all off, somehow Virginia is now a swing state. So I'm not surprised to see Kamala Harris desperately on the attack because the campaign is totally flailing right now.
I so love listening to you talk about chaos because I remember Donald Trump in 2016 warning us that if Hillary Clinton were president, it would be chaos all the time. And guess what? We had 4 years of chaos with Donald Trump. But Dana, let's talk about what's really going on here. Internally, I'm assuming the Trump campaign is seeing what I'm seeing, which is this talking about the conviction of Donald Trump on 34 felony counts is working. We have a CBS poll out just this morning. We have other polls coming out that are showing Joe Biden starting to move ahead. And here's the problem for the Trump campaign. These things matter when they underscore something that people already sense and believe about someone. They already sense and believe Donald Trump lied to them. He lied to them when he said he didn't sleep with Stormy Daniels. He lied to them when he said he was going to make all these things better. And guess what? His tax cuts helped the very wealthy. They harmed the middle class. And in fact, New York Times, I'm so glad you mentioned the New York Times, has a story out this morning about how so many of the promises that Trump is making. When he talks about mass deportations, guess what? That's going to increase our costs. When he talks about his trade policy, trade tariffs, guess what? That's going to increase our costs. And that's consistent with our own, that's consistent with our own reporting that showed that that showed the cost will go up about $1,700 for middle-class Americans. And all Donald Trump can do is talk retribution while his people do the best they can with the talking points.
Can I just sort of frame this conversation in a tick of a different way, and that is how this race could change a bit. Not a lot, but a bit. He hasn't picked his running mate yet. Right. And you just heard Kristi Noem saying pretty much point blank, he should pick a woman. She would like for it to be her. I don't know if it's going to be her. We got the list of the people who have gotten their vetting materials. There's only one woman on that list, and that is Elise Stefanik of New York. The woman who pretty much hands down could help him win more than any, of course, is Nikki Haley.
I don't know if it would help with me. I mean, listen, I want us to
But you're
win.
already going to vote for him.
Yeah, I'm a partisan Republican, but I think Nikki Haley would cause problems for me because it would say the future of the party is not in good hands. And I think that's what people are looking for the president, when he chooses the VP, somebody who continues along with the policies and the priorities that are important to him. And Nikki Haley just doesn't match those up. So I think that's the challenge you're going to have. And she hasn't sort of shown a propensity to even move towards the issues that Trump voters care about. And what the voters are going to care about and this party are going to care about are more of these things that President Trump's talking about. They're talking about tariffs. We've never, Scott's in shock here, I'm in shock here. We're now the party of tariffs. And our party wants more of it. Like, I've never predicted that. So our party is moving, and the reality is Nikki Haley's not moving with the party.
I think the issue is abortion rights. I mean, that's why Democrats have overperformed. When I was in Wisconsin, across the state, I mean, there's still an arcane law there that bans abortion. What people were talking about is the right to access to reproductive health, the right to access to contraception, and the fact that there's only one woman candidate on the running mate for Donald Trump shows that they're still out of touch. And that's why women are going to win this election for President Biden. I think that's why his numbers are moving in the CBS poll. And that's why I'm optimistic that he's going to get reelected.
Go ahead.
Well, I actually agree with Brian. I think you need a running mate. First of all, the number one thing is do no harm.
Bingo.
Second is you have to have someone who is going to unabashedly support your agenda. Like, you cannot have somebody out there who is pulling their punches on a daily basis. And so the list that he has out right now are a group of people that have shown time and again they are willing to step up and defend him and fight for his agenda. Nikki Haley has a lot of positions that I agree with, but she has a big problem with Donald Trump. She has said it time and again. I'm not sure that makes the best running
I think
mate.
it's clear Donald Trump continues to have trouble with women voters and consolidating suburban women. Kamala Harris, I think, has done an excellent job prosecuting the case for Joe Biden. I think they should consider, if I don't want to give Trump advice, but he might want to consider a woman, although I think the challenge for many women would be, how do I defend some of the misogyny of this man credibly? I think this is Nikki Haley's problem, while trying to get people to vote for him.
All right, we are out of time. We didn't
Yes.
get to the fact that Donald Trump was raising money from Silicon Valley
Most of
billionaires.
Tech still supports the
Okay,
president.
all right, there you go. You got it in there. You got it in there. Thanks, everybody.